Okay, everybody, welcome to another exciting video from Nonviolence Works. I'm here with my co-founder, co-host, Priya Darshini Kaul. Hello, Priya. We have a very special guest today. Yes, her name is Sarah Freeman-Wilbert. Sarah, welcome to our video series.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I work at FCNL as the manager of the advocacy teams, which is a big part of our grassroots work. And a lot of my job is to kind of support people around the country to feel like the policymaking process can be more accessible to them, to try to sort of see what it means to speak truth to power in almost a literal sense.
Speaking of which, I saw that you recently, last year, wrote about Black Lives Matter and how the struggle against police violence and racism inside institutions like the police can be tied into the history of nonviolence. Do you want to comment on that?
What I wrote about for Waging Nonviolence last year after the murder of George Floyd was the movement for Black lives, but this kind of broader movement against police violence and racist policing in the United States, and looking at this theory of the pillars of support and looking at how there are all these different actors who were coming together to really make that a moment where so much was taking place, because there were bus drivers, public bus drivers who were refusing to drive people to jail. There were teachers' unions who were refusing to let cops into schools. There were like donut shop owners who were refusing to serve police officers, or, all sorts of things like that. Like all of these different people who were kind of figuring out, what do I have power over and kind of what role can I play in this moment? And so that's something, as someone who's written for Waging Nonviolence for the past 5 years, that I thought was really interesting, because I could kind of see how all of these pieces were coming together, and wanted to kind of amplify that perspective, and sort of lift up all the amazing work that was happening. But it also is something that I bring into my work at FCNL, because I always think, nonviolent movements and uprisings and social movements are a product of so many different actors taking a piece of it and then really coming together and figuring out how those pieces fit together to form a much broader movement.
What's that like as a voting record who's extremely pro-war, pro-military? Maybe they have huge defense contracting interests in their district. How do you reach those people?
It's a difficult one, because personal work that each of us are doing to try to figure out how to stay in conversation with the most difficult people, in some ways, the people who we least want to talk to or to be in touch with. And for me, that's always something that I've found is really unique and resonates a lot with me. So while I also do some of this advocacy with my own, legislators, a lot of my job is like coaching and support for people. And it's really difficult, as you can imagine, especially, right now. And there's extreme polarization in Congress when that person has supported really harmful, violent actions, policies. And for us, one of the steps that we think needs to happen is to try to figure out how to shift these conversations about pieces of policy that can have such a huge impact on our lives, to try to shift them away from all of the contentious places we could go, and to try to instead ground ourselves in common values.
I wonder if the nonviolence of Jesus ever comes up in a conversation in which you, as somebody who's coaching groups, is trying to reach out and connect around common values with evangelical politicians.
This looks different depending on the issue, and I think depending on the legislators and depending on the group. We are positioned in such a way that we can actually go into certain offices and have certain conversations that a number of other groups can't.
Is there something you're learning from there that you think we can put into practice here?
One of the things that I really take away from, there are so many different kinds of nonviolent movements and resistance movements that are happening all around us all the time. And understanding the breadth and the diversity of what that looks like, to me, has been a really powerful way to look at nonviolence in like a much broader sense. Just knowing that the history of nonviolent movements in the United States is, as a high school student, learning about the Children's Crusade in Birmingham, Alabama, and there's all of these other examples that people don't necessarily know as much about, that can help us see how this is all around us and how we're a big part of it, rather than seeing it as something that only happens a few times every century in these big, explosive historical examples.
Thank you,
Thank
Sarah.
both for having me, and thanks for making the time. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Peace.